Well, good morning. It's good to be with you this morning. I was going to say good morning, boys and girls, but you're all girls. So no, I'm not going to say that. So nice to see you this morning. Have you ever seen a caboose on a train? No. Never seen one? No. They've been taking off for a few years now, but I used to live in a caboose. And I had to work. I started working on the railroad. I'm going to tell you that story in a little bit, but wanted to tell you a train story this morning. One day, I was sitting in the caboose. The conductor was down at his desk, and I was looking out it's called the cupola window. It's the window way up high. And I was sitting up there, and I was just looking. We were stopped. We had just left Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And I was looking out over this nasty swamp, dirty, like greasy, covered bugs everywhere on this swamp, just nasty. I'm just looking around it and looking over the countryside, no roads, no cabins, no homes, nothing. And all of a sudden, as I'm looking, right like in the middle of the swamp was like a bog, like a little island in the middle of the swamp. And all of a sudden I saw something move on that little island. And I looked again, I thought, what in the world? It was a little dog. And he was caught with his leash on that little island, and he's going like this. And I looked around again. I thought, well, there's got to be somebody around. Nobody at all. So I called to the conductor, and I say, Jack, I says, come on up, take a look at this. So he come up, and we looked, and sure enough, that little dog was just hung up right by his neck. So Jack called the engineer, and he says, don't move the train until you hear back from us. And he says, Dave, you go back, and I'll go forward. He says, let's see if we can find a place to get around to the backside, see if we can help that little dog. So we start this, and I start going one direction, Jack goes the other, and I'm looking at that swamp thinking, oh boy, it is greasy, nasty, stinky, bug-filled, nasty old swamp. And as I'm walking, I hear a splash. And I turn around, and Jack had taken off his bib overalls, got down to his underwear, and he jumped in the swamp, and he's swimming across. And I'm going, well, I'm glad he did that, so I don't have to. That's one good thing. But I'm thinking, well, I wonder what that dog's going to do when he comes up to him, because the dog might be scared, might bite him, he doesn't know. So he swims out to the swamp, and I mean, it was nasty. So he gets there, and the little dog just stopped all the pulling. And he looked up at him just like that, like, please help, please do something for me. Jack worked that leash, got it freed, put the dog under his arm, and he come back across that swamp. And he come out of the swamp, he looked like one of those green lizards, just dirty, stinky guy, and the little dog. But here's the deal. He brought the little dog, and we put him together in the caboose. You ever see a dog smile? This dog was smiling. This dog was smiling too. He just a big old grin on his face. And he ran back and forth in that caboose, back to Jack, back to me, just like he knew, you guys saved me, Here's the deal. We took him to a place and left him off, and they found a nice home for him. But here's the deal. I think all of us have been caught by the neck, and we're just hung up. And who's the one who swam across the bog or went to a cross for us? Who is it? Jesus did, didn't he? So he freed us. So I think we should live our lives like that little dog, smiling and running back and forth, being all happy. Right? Sure. You guys look beautiful today. Really beautiful, every one of you. So put a smile on your face and get ready for a good sermon, okay? Okay, God bless you. Well, let's pray. And I'm going to share my story with you. We all have a testimony. This is just kind of my turn to share it publicly, but I know we all have stories to share. People have said to me several times over the course of 35 years or whatever, how come you never lost your fire, And I really believe it's because I've always shared my testimony. Not always in a church setting, but in the dentist office, the doctor's office, everywhere. And I've never stopped. And I used to think it was my private devotions, but I've changed that thinking. I think there's something about, Mrs. White says that when we share our personal testimony, people will awaken us from a deep fog. Interesting, huh? Interesting statement. Not that you're in a fog by any means, but you know what I mean. Let's bow our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, it's good to be here at the Clanton Church. Nothing like the local church. My heart is here. I just love the local church. I love Sabbath school. I love good discussion. I enjoy the children singing. Just nothing better. Hearing the organ played so beautifully with the piano, it just is a blessing to my heart. So just ask that you'd bless me now. Lord, I'm far from a know-it-all. Don't let me come across like that. There's so much I don't know. But I do know that you touched me, and I know that my life has changed. And for that, I pray that you'll let me share humbly, but let me share it straight, because it's all about you. So I promise you that as I'm speaking, I'm listening. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You know, I walked over to my mom's one time. I had been working. I worked on the railroad. And I remember telling her, you know, Ma, I got everything. You know, I had a 3-bedroom ranch-style home, 2-car attached garage, half-acre lot out in the country, had a pickup truck, a motorboat, I had a camp on Lake Michigan. I had everything. Everything that society says you need to have to be happy, to be fulfilled. Well, I was like 25 years old. I had it all. And I remember over at my mom's house one day, I said to her, I says, you know, Ma, I feel like I got a hole right through my heart. And I says, I don't understand why I have this restlessness in me. And my mom says, Dave, you're just that kind of boy. You'll never be satisfied. You're just that kind of boy. I kind of walked away thinking, well, maybe I am, you know. But I can testify to you that when I came to Jesus, that hole in my heart was filled and never came back again, ever. You know, working on the railroad as a young man, you know, in Wisconsin, I was living in Michigan. I was 21 years old before you could drink, but we'd go to Wisconsin, you could drink at 18. So I started drinking, you know, right away on the railroad, and I'm one of those guys that people talk about when they say don't drink because you don't know what it'll do to you. I was hooked like that. My 2 brothers are alcoholics. My father was an alcoholic. The long line of the Livermores are alcoholics. I don't know if it's in our genes. I don't know what, but I was hooked and in trouble quick. I remember I got to tell you a little bit about my past to get you up to the Lord coming into my life. But I remember we'd worked from Gladstone to Rhinelander, about 126 rail miles. Always worked in the evening, got there in the morning, and I would go to it was called a Hungry Hollow Street in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. And it was just a line of bars. In fact, it actually went an extra block. And I knew every bartender by their first name. They knew my name, my first name. And I just would drink there until probably couldn't drink anymore, and then I'd go to the hotel and sleep for a couple hours and then work back home. But this one particular day, I was in there by about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I drank all by myself, sitting at the bar, until like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was really drunk, you know, and there were people coming out for like a light supper, and for some reason, the Lord has never taken this away from me. I can see these people like it was yesterday. I can see the red checkered tablecloth. I can see the basket with the hamburger and the fries on it, glasses of beer, and these 2 couples are sitting at this table. Well, I'm sitting at the bar, and I can tell I'm starting to get sick. And I can just, I'm going to throw up, you know. And I thought, boy, I've got to get to the restroom. And I tried to eyeball the restroom. I knew it was in the back of the bar there. And so I got up off the bar stool, and I'm walking towards that, the restroom, and I started to throw up. And I threw up all over those 2 couples, all over their food, just blasted. I mean, I blasted. And, and I rushed to the restroom. I locked the door. I don't know if they're going to come and beat me up or what, you know. So I locked the door. But I will tell you this. For the first time in my life, I looked up and I saw myself in a mirror. And I thought to myself, what's happening to me? It takes a lot for a guy to question, maybe a woman too, but all I know is my side. But it takes a lot for us to question ourselves to the point that you want to change. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and I didn't look like the person that my mom and dad raised. I wasn't behaving the way I knew you're supposed to behave. And I looked and I just said, wow, what's happening to me? Well, I wish I could tell you that everything changed from then on, but it didn't. And I continued to drink. I continued to use drugs. Was in the 70s, so all the drugs and things were really available. And one day I go over to my friend's house and we're drinking and smoking pot. And I come home, and I don't know this, but where we lived, we had this nice ranch home out in the country, and all the homes around us were of the same level, except for the house next to us. The house next to us was like a 2-room, maybe a little 3-room shack that the neighborhood talked about. We wished it was tore down. Well, unbeknownst to me, the person who lived in the shack was a Seventh-day Adventist lady. She came out her back door, walked across her backyard, into our backyard, and knocked on our kitchen door and asked Teresa if she wanted Bible studies. Now, since then, I've taught personal ministries for 5.5 years at Upper Columbia Conference in Spokane, Washington. So I know how to knock on doors and get people to respond. So I've questioned Teresa many times. What did she say? What was the entering wedge? Give me her line. Why were you so receptive? And all these things. Teresa says, she just introduced herself. I told her my name. She says, if you're ever interested in studying the Bible, I would love to study the Bible with you. I said, that's all there is to it? She says, yeah. Teresa was ready. Our marriage was bad, was falling apart. We never stayed married had we both not come to the Lord, But so I come home this day, and this woman's in my kitchen, and as some of you old-timers will remember the Duquesne projector. Remember the little film strip and the little tape? That was sitting on my kitchen table. So this young pastor of yours, he doesn't have an idea what the Duquesne projector is. I just saw him. No, not in those days, Pastor Zeke, not in those days. But as I come into the kitchen, Teresa's mad at me because I've been out drinking, and with my friends. And as I'm walking by the kitchen table, I glance at that Duquesne projector and the little film strip, and there's this picture of Jesus that I've seen hanging up in churches since then, but there's this picture of Jesus. And my mind says, who in the world could ever be interested in something like that? That is exactly what I think. And I'm walking by, and I go into the hallway, and I get in the hallway, and the Holy Spirit speaks to me. He talks to drunks, people who are high. He talked to me, clear as a bell. Here's what he said. That woman back there, sitting in your kitchen, has something you don't have. Now, remember how I started? I had everything. And so I'm just arrested. I'm just stopped. And I think, oh yeah? Well, I'll go back and see what she's got. So I go back to the kitchen table. I sit down, and this woman says, hi, Dave. You ever read the Bible? Never had a Bible in my life. Never touched them. 27 years old. Never touched a Bible. Had no clue. But what do you say when somebody says that to you? It's kind of like, do you believe in grandmas, Chevrolets, and Bible? You don't know what to say. So I said, yeah, lied to her. She says, you ever study it? Oh, I didn't think she's going to go there, And I says, no. She says, would you ever be interested in studying it? I says, yeah. So she reached in this envelope, and she pulled out this Bible study guide. She hands me this Bible study guide, and I looked. Remember, I'm pretty bold because I'm drunk, And I look, and I see that brown envelope about this thick. And she gave me just one Bible study guide. And I'm thinking, well, I wonder what's the rest of them, So I reached over, and I took the whole envelope from her. And the next day, my wife ran and bought me a Bible. I'll tell you just real quickly. She hands me this Bible, King James version of the Bible. And, I'd never read Bible in my life. She hands me this King James version of the Bible, and so I got to tell you, I'm kind of excited about reading the Bible. I've got Bible study guides, so I'm thinking maybe I can understand something. And she hands me this Bible, and I start to read it, and I said, Treese, you didn't get me the English version. I can't understand it. True story. And Treese says to me, Dave, if you'll pray before you read that, the Lord will reveal what you need to know. And he did. I still have that Bible in my study. So I go to work, and I start doing these Bible studies. I'll just be true. I lived a raunchy life, terrible life. And I'm thinking, I don't know, God is great, but I'm pretty lost here, and I'm going through these studies, and, can you trust the Bible, and that kind of thing. And I don't remember now, this is many years ago, which study it was, if it was 8-9 or 7-8-9 or like that, I don't know. But I come to the salvation one. And I can remember it like yesterday. Being pulled up Pembine Hill, maybe 5 miles an hour. I'm 100 cars behind everybody, all by myself. And I read this text, 1 John 1:9, that if I'd confess my sin, he's faithful and just to forgive me my sin and cleanse me from all unrighteousness. And I got to tell you, when I first read it, I said to myself, it's too good to be true. There's no way. There's no way it can be like that. And I kept doing the lesson, and the lesson just drew me in. And I left where the conductor does his work on his desk. I left, and I got up in those high seats again in the cupola. And I ripped out the back of the seat, and I laid it back kind of like I'm in a lazy boy. I had my parka on, and I rolled over against the window, and I'm kind of stretched out there. And I got to tell you, that fight or flight thing that we all have? You're either going to get into the fight or you're going to run, one or the other. I have always had way too much of the fight in me, always. And I just don't cry. I just don't cry. As I'm getting older, I tend to choke a little bit more, but I don't cry. I watch Elder Isley, and tears come to his eyes so easy, and he's so sensitive, with such a soft heart. And I think, man, I wish I had a little bit more of that, But I don't. I used to tell my dad, you can't make me cry, which is not a good idea, but I would. And but I'm up in the caboose, and I rolled over, and I start confessing my sin. I'll tell you, I have never, before then and since then, ever spent a night like that in my life. Never. And I started to cry, and not just tear up, cry. And I truly was broken. I truly was broken. And I realized that without him coming into my life and saving me, I'm lost. I'm flat out lost. And we talked a little bit about that in Sabbath school, And I came to the realization, I'm not living the way he would expect me to live, or in respect to him saving me. I'm living like an animal, And so I confessed, I don't know how long. I have estimated between 2 and 3 hours. I had a lot of time before our next stop. And I was just wore out from that experience. And I told the Lord, I says, I probably forgot some sins, and for them I'm sorry too, But I told him that night, I said, if you'll really do this for me, this is where that delete button comes in. If you'll really push this delete button on me and clean me up, I promise you, I will never take it for granted, ever, as long as I live. And to the best of my knowledge, I never have. And I stepped out of that caboose in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, a different person. I don't know why things happen in my life so fast. I don't know. But I walked by those bars at the Hungry Hollow. I had to walk by the street to go up to the Finland Hotel. And there was not an ounce of temptation from that time on for the rest of my life. Now I got to hasten the story here a little bit. But, we get baptized together the best day of our life, bar none. And life just gets good, you know. I remember one time a guy saying, hey, what's the eyes color of your kids? I didn't know. You know, I didn't know nothing. You know, I was never home. When I was home, I was loaded. I didn't know anything. And I remember being kind of embarrassed, you know, so I just guessed, you know. But I didn't know, but when I got home, I grabbed Krista's head and looked at her color of her eyes. You know? But I knew them now. I knew the color of their eyes now. And life got so good, you know. So 9 months, I'm putting in messages. I'm laying off from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And very unique for me because I worked 7 days a week for years and years and years. And so 3 things will happen to me after I've been a Seventh-day Adventist for 9 months. I don't know why these 3 things happen in succession, but these are the 3 things I'll tell you, and then I'll sit down. The first one is I started witnessing in the caboose, you know. I mean, let me tell you, I was on fire, you know, just on fire. And I'm playing C.D. Brooks tapes, you know, in the caboose. And, man, I'm sharing everything I'm learning, I'm sharing, you know. So I'm working with this guy, and I bring him to church with me. I bring him to some other meetings that we have. And he's coming along really good, you know. His name is Larry. Coming along really good. And one night he comes to work, and I'm registering. I was conductor that night, and I'm registering out in the depot. He comes in, he goes, hey, Dave, he says, you ever smoke any Hawaiian? I looked at him, I says, no. He said, I got some for us tonight. This is months after studying with him. And he leaves. You know, he's got to go and connect the air hoses between the cars and do the air test. So I go to the caboose, and as we're leaving town, we pick him up. You know, so he gets in the caboose with me, and we've got like a 40-mile ride before our first stop. So we get back in there together, and he goes, hey, Dave, he says, do you want a joint of your own, or do you want to share one? And I looked at him, and I said, I don't want any, Lair. You know, I don't want any. I said, so let's listen to some more tapes and talk about them. And he goes, hey, he says, let's smoke a joint together. Then we'll listen to the Bible study. Our minds will be so much more expanded, and we'll learn so much more. And I said, I don't think it works that way, Lair. I don't think it works that way. So I leave him, and I get up in the cupola again, those high seats. So Larry's up in the cupola alongside me. Between us is the radio. That's the only thing separating us. And he lights up a joint. Now, I'm just going to tell you, you know, I'm a red-blooded American male. I've been tempted in all things, okay? I have never in my existence ever been tempted like I was tempted that night. Ever. In anything. And when I smelt that pot, I started to salivate. My back beat up with sweat. I could feel it running. I could feel sweat running under my arms. And I'm going, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. And I know I'm in trouble, you know. And I'm thinking, man, how did I end up here like this? You know, and I'm kind of mad at myself, just thinking, you know, I just know me. I know me. I know what I'm going to do. And he goes, hey, Dave, he says, here. And he leans, you know, there's steps that got us up into these high seats. We both have steps, and we sit like this. He comes across, he leans across, puts a foot on my step, and he's got this joint that he's given me. And I'll tell you. So I reached over, and I took it, and I got it in my hand, and I did one thing that I had never done before in my life when temptation came my way. And I call it now my 911 prayer. And I just said, Lord, I know you've got a universe to run, and I'm just a speck of dust here. But if you don't come down and give me a strength above and beyond what I have, I'm going to smoke this joint, and then I'm going to eat the roach too. And I can only tell you, this burst of what? The Holy Spirit? I don't know. But something that enabled me, I'm a born abuser. I'm a born abuser of substances. I'm just that way. I took that joint, and I felt this strength inside of me, and I passed it back to Larry, and I said, you know, Larry, I don't need that stuff anymore. And I never was tempted again, ever. The second thing is, being on the railroad, they work 7 days a week, and they boast, actually, that they run 7 days a week, and all they have to offer, 24 hours a day, all they have to offer is service. That's what they say. So I'm working, but I'm getting my weekends off. So I leave on a Wednesday night, and I'm due back on Thursday. Get caught in a huge snowstorm, upper Michigan, big snowstorm. And actually, we get stuck in the snow. So somebody has to come in from behind us, grab our caboose and half our train, pull it apart, shove it in a siding, go and get the other half, It's just a mess in the snow. So we end up what they call dying on the road. There was a 14-hour working law. Now it's 12, but it was 14 hours in those days. And if you didn't make your destination in that 14-hour, you had to clear the main line and get off into the siding. So that's where we are, and we're like 90 miles from Gladstone. I mean, we're just... The days are just going. So I don't get into Gladstone until Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Now, in the wintertime, sundown's like at 4 up there, It's so early. So I'm just thankful that I got in. I walk into the depot, and the operator comes out, and he says, you can't be off tonight. He says, we're running snowplows in every direction. We need every man. I didn't say a word. Yard clerk came out. He goes, hey, Dave. He says, you got to work tonight, okay? As soon as your rest is up, we'll be calling you. He says, snowplows are going everywhere. I didn't say a word. So I registered in, left my way bills there, and I go and I get in my car, and I live about 5 miles up in the country. I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, well, did I just prefer this, Is this just cleaned up my life, and it's not really God? Or am I really convicted that what he says is true? And God said, remember the Sabbath day, that it was him that said that. So I'm wrestling with all this stuff. And I'm thinking if I lose my job, what in the world am I going to do? I'm in the Upper Peninsula. I mean, there's nothing up there. My mother-in-law's home, just to give you an idea, went on the market because she's going in this assisted living home. And I think she's got 10 acres. Nice home. I've been a part of that family since I've been 16 years old. Teresa was my high school sweetheart. And I mean, nice house, nice yard, nice garage. $62,000 is for sale for. So that's how depressed it is. Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable. So anyway, When I got my rest, I told Teresa and the girls, we would pray and not answer the phone. So as soon as your rest is up, the phone starts ringing. And they call me to work, phone ring. They give you an hour and a half call. For ring. It goes on and on and on. Finally, at midnight, there's a knock on my door. So I open my door, and my dad's standing there. My dad's the engineer, same railroad. My grandpa had been a fireman. And so my dad's standing there. He said, what you doing, boy? And I said, Dad, I've explained this to you before. I said, I'm not going to explain it to you right now. And he says, we need to get down there and get to work. And he says that they need you. They can't run a snowplow without you. And I said, well, I'm not going to go. And behind my dad was my mom. I never saw her until she leaned out like this here, big tears running down her face. And she says, David, you're going to lose everything you have. You need to get down there and get to work. And I says, Ma, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think so. And I said, I'm not going to go. So went to bed, and got up in the morning, went to church, and church about this size, Escanaba, Michigan, if you've ever been up there, way up in the UP, and had a Sabbath school class where we sat in a circle of chairs. And I'll never forget Jerry Snowden, who was teaching the class. It was his class. And when he found out about this, man, we must have spent half an hour praying. I mean, it was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And before I left church that day, 3 guys came up to me and said, hey, don't you worry. If they fire you, I got a job for you. three different guys offered me jobs, And, well, I didn't want to lose my job. I mean, I didn't want to lose it, So anyway, so I go back to work on Sunday. And there's a letter in my mailbox that said there'd be a formal investigation held against me for not showing up for work Friday night. So in the letter, they described, that I could get a couple of character witnesses for me as a stuff. Now remember, I'm only 9 months a Christian, and my life was lots to talk about back there, okay? On the railroad all those years and stuff. So I'm thinking, boy, So I asked a couple guys who knew how much my life had changed, an engineer and a conductor, and they came. So when we came for the formal investigation, there's like a little table, and, this is back quite a ways. So a little cassette tape player with one little microphone. And so a little different. So they have their side, and we come to the other side of the little table, and one at a time. So they present my case and make me look insubordinate. I mean, I'm thinking, boy, God, if you don't show up, man, I won't make it out of here with a job, And so my guys come and they talk, and it's all good, and stuff, but nobody touches the real reason why I didn't show up. Nobody touches it. So then it's my turn. And I come up, and the train master, the operator, and the agent are sitting right there. And I got this little microphone, and I'll tell you, I tried to write out what I wanted to say. I must have thrown 100 pieces of paper away. Just my thoughts just couldn't come together. And I tried to write it. And finally I came to a text. And you might want to look at this with me. In Matthew chapter 10, beginning in verse 18. And this is what I hung it all on. It says, on my account, you will be brought before governors and kings, or train masters, agents, operators. That's how I was reading it, as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time, you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brothers and sisters, this is the most exciting part of my testimony. At this particular time in my life, I'm a very uneducated person. Okay, school was never stressed. My dad had a second-grade education. Just education was never a big deal in our home. It was work. So I learned to work. And that's why when the folks come up, the first thing they're saying is, "Get back, keep that job. You got to work. What else are you going to do?" So. I'm trying to write it out. My English isn't good. It still isn't that great, and it's just no good. I lean on this promise. And in my Bible that Teresa gave me, I have a T and a P. And I put them by all the promises, tried and proven. And my Bible, of course, I don't have my Bible with me. It's in here now. But back then, in those days, I carried it with me all the time. I have must be a half dozen Bibles with all those markings in them. But this one, I come before them, and I says, well, no one's really talked about the reason why I didn't come to work. It's because of religious reasons. And the train master reached over, and he shut that tape player off. And he says, Livermore, he says, do you know what you're doing? And all of a sudden, this strength comes inside of me. Can't explain it. I mean, I know more now, but back then, I can't understand it. And this strength comes inside of me, and I looked this train master square in the eye, and I never looked white-collar people in the eye. I was totally a blue-collar kid. Totally. I looked him square in the eye, and I said, yes, sir, I know exactly what I'm doing. I reached over and pressed record. I was ready. I started to talk, and all I can tell you, it was not me. It wasn't me. I couldn't put it like that. I couldn't say it. I've tried to find that cassette tape because it's the best explanation of the Sabbath that I ever gave in my life. And while I'm saying it, this is the craziest thing. While I'm saying it, I'm going, wow, I really sound smart. I really sound really good at this, And man, it's just issuing out of me. And whoa, I am so satisfied with what I said there. So we get all done, and he kind of passed me on the shoulder. He says, well, they got 5 days to get back to you with judgment. And I said, okay. So 5 days later, there's a letter in my mailbox, and it says to resign and seek other employment. And so I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to do? Now, remember, I've got everything a person could ever want, but I've also got the bills that go with all that stuff too, okay? And I'm thinking, whoa, what am I going to do? So I go see my pastor, and the pastor says, well, let's write a letter to the guy that sent you this letter. I said, okay. So I wrote a letter to a guy by the name of Harry Ellefson, assistant superintendent in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Sent a letter to him, and he calls me up, and he says, I was in Rhinelander in the middle of a trip. He calls the hotel, actually, and phoned me, and he says, I'll meet you in Gladstone tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., upstairs of the depot. I said, okay. So I work all night. I go take a quick shower. I come back down, and there's outside steps, at Gladstone. So I clanked my way up there. I come in. There's a long corridor, door after door after door, not a typewriter, not a sound from anybody else being up there. Not one sound. Don't know if they were or not, but I didn't hear anybody. I go to the end of the hallway, and there's a little chair at the end. So I sit down in that chair. I hear coming up the steps. And I had heard about this guy, had never seen him, but had heard about him. My dad actually had worked with him in the grain trains in North Dakota. This guy comes in. He's the epitome of the white-collar person. Got white hair, a white shirt. I swear I could have put sunglasses on. It was so bright. Got a black suit and a black trench coat. And here he comes down the hallway. And I'm just thinking, oh, my goodness, So I stand up. He goes, Harry Ellefson. And I says, Dave Livermore. He says, I understand we have a problem. And I says, yes, sir. He turned just steely cold. And he says, or should I say, you have a problem. And I thought, oh, boy. We went into one of the offices there. He shut the door. And this guy gave it to me. I mean to tell you. I had 10 years seniority. I was able to hold good jobs now and stuff. He's just giving it to me that religion is popular. My wife had talked me into this. I'm going to lose everything that I have. Just on and on and on and on. And again, that fight in me, I want to argue. I want to come back. I want to talk about the good side. Holy Spirit just kept saying to me, Dave, don't say nothing. Don't say nothing. Let the last 9 months defend you. Don't say nothing. And so I thought, well, he knows what I've done all those years before. He's got to know this last 9 months. So I didn't say anything. And finally, he just burst into like a tantrum. And he says, are you telling me that if we need you to work on a Friday night, and he says, there's fuel oil on those trains. There's perishables on those trains. And you're too good to get on that train and take it to the people that have purchased it from us? Is that what you're telling me, Livermore? Is that what you're saying here? I can't do it even the way he did it. And I looked at, at him, and I said, yes, sir, that's what I'm telling you. I'm not going to come. And he had a pen behind his ear, and he took the pen and he threw it across the room, and he says, I never heard of anything like this in my life. And the Holy Spirit whispered in my ear, that's why you're here, Dave. It was just a remarkable moment. That isn't a thought I would have had. I was so scared. I was scared to death what I'm going to do. I got 2 little girls. I got a wife. I'm scared to death. My folks are going to be ashamed of me. I'm going to lose my job. What am I going to do? So it wasn't my thought. And finally he says, I don't know what to do with you. He said, I'm going to send you to Minneapolis, talk to the general superintendent, and let him deal with you. So I says, okay. So I got a date. I drive to Minneapolis. The day I ride to Minneapolis for this meeting, it's 40 below zero. I mean to tell you, brutally cold. Plus, I'm scared. My nerves are on edge. And so downtown Minneapolis, Sioux Line building, I'm on the 6th floor. I walk in and I meet this guy by the name of Cliff Leary. And he also knew my dad. But he says, when I walked into his office was amazing. His office was probably half the size of this sanctuary, and half of it was train set. Just the most spectacular train set. Everything inside of me wanted to say, hey, can you turn that baby on? Let me see what it does, but you can't be messing around, so thought I better not. So I sit in front of his desk, big old deep desk. I sit in front of his desk, and he goes, well, let me get to know you a little bit, Livermore. He reaches down, he pulls up this manila folder, 1.5 inches thick, I'll guess. And so he's got the folder in front of him. I'm sitting there, and he says, he wants to get to know me. So he starts paging through, and he looks up at me, he goes, It's my record of the last 10 years on that railroad. And so he says to me, so is it true that you could hop off the engine at Hermansville, run into the Broad Axe Saloon, get 2 6-packs of beer, and get back on the train, and the train never had to stop? And I'm thinking, who in the world squealed on me? I says, yes, sir. And he goes like this, And he says, is it true? At the party, he had the date of the party in the Fill-In Hotel, and that's all we did, for all those years. And I'm just thinking, I'm sold out. He knows everything. And so finally he gets to the last part, and he goes, well, he said, looks like you're in quite a bit of trouble here. And I says, yes, sir, I guess I am. He says, well, tell me about it. Again, I have one of those experiences of Matthew 10. And I'm really talking really good, really clear. And I stopped kind of in the middle, and I told him, I says, Mr. Leary, if you'll give me the Sabbath off, I said, I'll move to Minneapolis, and I'll clean this office building if you give me that job. I just want the Sabbath off. That's all I want. I'll do whatever I have to do. And he looked at me, he says, Livermore, I think you would. And I says, I got responsibilities. I was raised that way to be responsible. I've worked since I've been in 5th grade, And I says, I just want the Sabbath off. And then we started talking about my church. And I told him about, I feel like for once I've learned to be a man, and I've learned to be a dad. And I says, it's just like the church is raising me. All the stuff I never knew before. And I says, I don't want to lose that, Mr. Leary. And I'm afraid, I says, if I walked away from it, it'd take me that long to slide back to where I was. I know me. And I says, they help me, hold me accountable. I says, I need that in my life. He stops and he says, Livermore, I think we need more people like you on this railroad. Now I'm telling you, he doesn't have any idea how close he got to being kissed by me, let me tell you. I needed to hear that, But anyway, so he told me a couple things I could do. One, I could give up my conductor rights, which was $10,000 a year, get into the train service where I'd be making up the trains, or yard service, and get off the train service. So I'd work in a switch yard. And then he says, if you run into trouble, he says, you call me. I didn't feel too good about that, about calling him, because I'd gone as far as you can go with this formal investigation stuff. So anyway, so I went back home, and I gave up my conductor rights, and I caught a lot of chastisement about that, but minor to me, meant nothing to me. And even though I had studied hardest I've ever studied in my life to pass it, meant nothing to me. The money meant nothing. I just needed enough money to pay my bills, all I needed. And then about 9 months later, I was able to get into the yard work and become a switch foreman. But all those 9 months, those next 9 months, never worked the Sabbath on that road, never worked the Sabbath one time. Kept every Sabbath off. Religious Liberty told me, you'll never make it. They said, railroad and post office, you can't get the Sabbath off. I'm living proof you can if the Lord wants you to. So the yard clerk in the Gladstone Depot is a good friend of mine. And he come up to me after I come home from Minneapolis, and he says, hey, they really gave it to you up there, huh? And I looked at him, and I said, well, actually, I got it worse up here, upstairs here. And he says, well, they called here, I says, really? He says, yeah, they told all the yard clerks that on Saturday morning, by 11 o'clock, drive over to the Escanaba Seventh-day Adventist Church and make sure Livermore's vehicle is there and drive back. I told him, I said, the day it's not there, I'll be back in work, I'll tell you. But I kept Sabbath about 6.5 years there, and just kept a job, paid my bills. And just the Lord is so good to me. He revealed himself. You know that statement Mrs. White makes about you have nothing to fear for the future unless you forget how he led you in the past? That's why I love telling my testimony, because it fires me up for what I'll face this next week again, because I know he's with me. I know he's with you. He's with us. We're a movement of destiny. We're not just some other church on the block here, So anyway, that really is a good thing in my life. And then I'm able to really go off into the church work, and I just loved it. But third thing, and I'll go fast. I'm out in the front yard playing football with the girls. I got 2 girls. And then in the neighborhood, kids were there, and I'm playing football. And one of the elders from the church drives up, and he goes, "Hey, Dave," he says, "there's a meeting at the jail tonight. He said, do you want to come with me?" I thought, well, I've never been to jail, but I probably should have been, but never been to jail. Sure, I'll go with you. So that night, Leroy picks me up, and we go off to the Delta County Jail in Escanaba, Michigan. That's actually where the church is that I joined. And go into the jail. Downstairs in the jail was this big circle of chairs. I'm guessing it had to be like 50 people. I mean, it felt just packed in there. They're all in the center of the chairs, and man, they're all arguing. They're all fighting. They're all clergy, but Leroy and I mean, what in the world am I doing here? I mean, I don't belong here. And I actually heard nuns swearing, and they were all mad. And the reason why, this was a brand new sheriff that had just been elected, and there had been a chaplain, a Baptist chaplain at the jail, who, if an Adventist boy went to jail here, Pastor Zeke would want to go see him. Pastor Zeke would be met at the door by this Baptist chaplain, and he would say, "You're not welcome here. Your spiritual condition is being taken care of by me." You can imagine that went over like a lead balloon in the community, So they're all mad about that. They're all fighting over that. And the new sheriff wants to change everything. He fired the chaplain. The chaplain's gone. He wants to change everything. Now, I'm going to tell you the honest truth here. This big circle of chairs, there's not a seat for Leroy or I. Not a seat. So we grabbed 2 chairs, and we're sitting outside the circle. And it's kind of dark down there. It's the basement of a jail. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people couldn't even see us. So we're sitting back there, and this guy turns around after some time. I don't have a clue. I don't know anybody in there but Leroy. This guy turns around, and he goes, looks right at me. He says, "Who are you?" Here's what I said. I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I looked at the guy, and I go, "I'm nobody. Don't even look at me. I don't want to talk to you." And I'm thinking, why don't you look at Leroy? Leroy's right here. Talk to Leroy, I mean, that's how intimidated I was of people, Guy turns around like, I'm some kind of a nutcase or something, and a little bit of time goes by, and he turns around and he says, what are you guys doing here? Like that, He's a Mennonite pastor, which I find out later, and I looked at him, honestly, here's what I say. I don't know what I'm doing here. Just turn around, don't look at me. I don't want to talk, And I'm so uncomfortable. I just want to run. I just want to run out of there. I don't like it one bit. And Leroy never looks at Leroy. Never looks at him. So finally the guy turns around again, and he goes, "What's your name?" And I'm thinking, there's Leroy, his name, not me. And I said, "Dave Livermore." "Oh, okay." Turns around again a little bit later. He goes, "What church you with?" I said, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Okay. Never one time asked Leroy his name, what church he was from, not one time. And a little while later, this guy stands up. Remember, we're outside the circle. And he says, "I'd like to nominate Dave Livermore to be the jail ministry coordinator here." Wow. Yeah. Wow is right. Like, what is that? What did I get nominated for? Leroy passed me on the knee, and he goes, "Good for you, Dave." And I'm going, "Good for me. I don't even know what I'm going to do." But I'll tell you, the Lord knew. The Lord knew. So anyway, they were going to pay me and stuff. I told them I don't need any money. I'll be happy to volunteer for it, And that ministry is the ministry that changed my life. I mean, radically changed my life. Because it was there. I cannot tell you how many hundreds of inmates over that 6-year period, 6+, that I knelt down with and prayed Jesus into their hearts. I have no idea how many over all those years. And it's there where I decided, boy, I would really like to work with people instead of boxcars. I really like people. Well, one day, the psychologist at the jail was a guy I worked real closely with, and we would go out and bring the spouse, stuff, and our community services was helping with gloves and scarves and hats and just a good ministry. And he says to me one day, he says, hey, Dave, he says, you ever think about going to college? And I looked at him and I said, no, never thought. And, I need to tell you, I went in 1969. And I majored in ping pong and basketball and figured I couldn't make a living with either one. I better get to work. That's all I did. So, it never was a thought. And this is, 12 years later. And here's what he said. Yeah, but you're different now. Like a fly to fly paper, that thing hit me. And I thought, there's no doubt. I'm different now. But am I that different that I could actually learn something? And anyway, a year goes by. The psychologist again says to me, he says, you ever get in college? I said, no. He goes, here. He tosses me Intro to Psychology. He says, I'm teaching it at the community college in Escanaba. Take the class for me, Dave. So I went over there. My grandma gave me $100 for the class. That's all it cost in those days. Took a 4-credit class, and I got the first A that I ever got in my life. And I wanted to run down to my mom and say, put this on the refrigerator. look at this, And I was so excited. But that guy, I believe, was led by the Lord because it lit a fire under me. It lit a fire that I could learn. And I'm not dumb. I just never applied myself. Like a whole lot of us, like so many of us. And so I felt like, hey, I got time here. I can learn something. So I took 16 credits, took 18 credits. Next time, I end up with my associate's degree. Okay, and I'm still on the railroad, still doing jail ministry and going to school. And so the switching in the evening enabled me to go to school in the daytime. It's just amazing how it all fit together. And I'm doing well. I get my associate's degree in human services, and I want to be a parole officer. That's what I want to be. I want to get that MSW degree. I want to be a parole officer because I love the jail. I love the inmates and stuff. So once I get that 2-year degree, I got to go to Northern Michigan University in Marquette, Michigan to finish it up. So I go up there. Brothers and sisters, the switch engine hours changed on me 3 times every time I went and got my classes. The switch engine hours never change. 3 times. And finally my wife says, maybe the Lord wants you to be a pastor and not a parole officer. And I went, parole officer? Pastor? Kind of the same thing. No, just kidding. Just kidding, yeah. But I thought to myself, maybe he does. So she said, why don't you just call Andrews and see what they say? So Andrews University is in Lower Michigan, so I called them, and first thing I asked was about the MSW degree, and they said, no, at that time they didn't have it. And I said, well, can I talk to the theology department? And I talked to Elder Carl Kaufman. He's passed away now. I actually went to his funeral. Just thumbprinted my life. And I called him up, and he invited me down to go see him. And he said to me, Dave, he says, you're called to be a pastor. He says, you get your degree, I guarantee a placement. And I was kind of worried because I wouldn't finish up till I was 36 years old, So I thought, well, maybe there's not a place for me after, I'm too old or whatever. And anyway, he just really encouraged me. And so I did. I did. I sold everything I had. I worked my last day, December 28th, 1985, and walked off that railroad. And there's so much to tell you. I can only give you the thumbnail deal here. But it was the most remarkable experience I've ever had. And went down to Andrews and worked hard. University level work is far greater than community college work, and worked hard. But I'll tell you, this big debate about prayer in school. When Livermore was in school, there was plenty of prayer in school. I'll tell you, the only way I got through, was by praying. And the Lord was so good to me. I won't tell you some of those stories, but, I come out of school. In fact, I was there 3 weeks. And I had an interview with the Wisconsin Conference and just got there. I got 2 years of school to do, and they picked us up. They paid for the kids' church school and just helped us, and I went to Natty, the field school, for 6 months instead of 1 quarter. I stayed for 6 months. Just loved it. That was the way for me to learn, not just do book learning, but get out and do the Bible studies and the seminars, and just had a great time. So then I went to Wisconsin, pastored 3 little churches in the southwest corner of Wisconsin. I got a call in January from Wisconsin to Hawaii. Now, it had to be the Lord, right? It just had to be. So he bailed me out of that winter and went to Hawaii for 3 years, pastored on the Big Island in Kona. And then left there, went to Oregon, and stayed at one church in Oregon for almost 14 years. And did what I thought I was called to do. And had a great group of people, had an incredible church. My idea was we're going to marshal ourselves together to change this community. That was our goal. And someday I'll come back and hold a seminar and share some stories with you about that. But it was incredible. Thought I would just stay there until I was done and the Lord came, one or the other. Got a call to Spokane, Washington. That's Upper Columbia Conference over the Cascades on the east side of the mountains there. And worked for 5.5 years there in personal ministries. Enjoyed it. Brought my Bible worker with me, that had worked with me for 14 years. So altogether, he and I worked almost 20 years together. Best friends. Never had an argument. Never had a word exchanged in a hurtful way in all those years. I mean, we just worked like 2 peas in a pod and worked hard. Anyway, brought him over with me. So I'm sitting in Spokane. I've got everything that I ever dreamt I'd have, and Teresa's working for the education department. Just a good life. Teresa would tell you, she saw in me that restlessness come back. Like I'm not challenged enough, And just as she saw that come back into me, I never did, not a bit. Elder Isley called me up. He says, hey, can we put your name on a list of 60 men? 60! And I don't know, Elder Isley. I never heard of Gulf States Conference. Never heard of it. And Gulf States, like G-O-L-F, where do you guys go? Where's the Gulf? And so he calls me up, and then he called me back, and he says, you're in the top 5. He said, I'd like to come see you. I said, okay. So now it's getting kind of serious, on a list for 60, you'll never hear from him again kind of thing, But he comes, and we have an interview at the house, and I had neck surgery. And I had a 6 and 7 fused back there. And so I was a little bit, kind of just, I was like less than a week out of that surgery. And he's in there talking to us and stuff. And anyway, he says, I'd sure like to see this go to the next level, but I'm not done with my interviews. So he goes and calls us back, and he says, you're number 1 of the top 5. Would you come to Montgomery and check us out? So it'll be a year ago this month already. We flew over here, stayed 4 days, and just met everybody, went to executive committee and everything. And I tell you, the Lord is so good, so amazing. I'll close with this. If he can take me, and make something out of my life that matters, he can take anybody. I believe the root of it was in that caboose, in the cupola, with 1 John 1:9. I believe that's the root of it. And I've never looked at life ever again the same. So never give up on anybody, okay? Not yourself, not your kids, your brothers, your sisters. There's always hope as long as Jesus is alive.